Welcome to the Unforgiving 60 with your hosts, Ben Pronk and Tim Curtis. As two ex-SAS guys armed with MBAs, Ben and Tim seek out people leading lives less ordinary and talk with them about how they fill their unforgiving minutes and what helps them go, always, a little further. Like intellectual bowerbirds, we aim to collect shiny little objects of knowledge that we think can help build better humans.
Philosophically, what's the difference between fitness and toughness? It's what's between your ears. Sure, the tough people have to be fit, but if the fit people aren't tough, they're not going to make it through.
Good as Gold's the official Gold's Gym Australia podcast.
Welcome back to another episode of the Good as Gold podcast. I'm your host, Callum, alongside Emily, of course.
Aloha.
Today we have an amazing episode on resilience, being resilient. What is resilience?
Yes, we have the fabulous Tim and Ben from the Resilience Shield. These guys talk to us today on, honestly, all things being resilient, how to be resilient, how our kids can be resilient. There's so much juice in this episode that you guys literally don't want to miss out on.
No, and the cool thing is like all the stuff they said was backed by science. Like everything has had like a clinical trial.
Yep.
Everything is backed by psychological, like tests, and it challenged me.
Yes, there were some things in there that we can all take away from and actually really implement into our life. So without further ado.
Yeah.
Proudly supported by Raw Energy, cafe partner for Gold's Gym Australia.
Alrighty, Tim and Ben, welcome to the Good as Gold podcast. Tell the people who you are in a snapshot.
Two ex-SAS guys with MBAs. We nearly speak for each other. Our biographical details are nearly identical. Both born in Queensland. Both scholarship to the Australian Defence Force Academy. Both graduated from the Royal Military College up to Townsville, where we did our formative years. Then did SAS selection at different times, mind you. I'm a sort of half generation ahead of Ben. And then saw the majority of our military service in the SAS regiment. And then kind of my path diverged a bit. I spent the next 10 years in the Middle East working for the UN as a consultant and then running a group of multinational companies, and then came back home in 2014, which is where we reunited.
Yeah, unlike Tim, I couldn't get a proper job, so I stayed in the army. I loved my military career. I stayed in a little bit longer. So Tim was my second boss in the SAS regiment.
The best of the two.
I like to joke, out of the three bosses I had, Tim was absolutely one of them. So we had that time together, a year or so together. I then stayed in the unit, ended up as the commanding officer, which was awesome. I had a really amazing military career, very lucky in terms of a lot of different things. And then as I was looking to get out, that was that sort of serendipitous meeting up. Tim had just come back from the Middle East. I was probably thinking of jumping into a big corporate or something like that. Tim said, why don't we start this thing together? And don't tell him, but I will forever be thankful. It's been brilliant.
Wow.
And where along that whole timeline did you guys meet?
So we actually met in 2002 at a mutual friend's wedding. I knew I was going to be Ben's squadron commander the next year, and then we kind of spent 2003 in that, let's call it master-slave relationship, Ben.
I thought you were going to say sort of Yoda, Skywalker.
And then we stayed in touch. We probably in many ways kindred spirits. I'd done my MBA. Ben was doing his MBA, so we kind of reconnected on that basis. We were both mad CrossFitters, and so we used to, watch each other's performance at the CrossFit Open. Reconnected when we came back, more socially than anything else, talking MBAs and study we kicked off our little venture here in 2018, and it's just been, it's been an amazing nearly 5 years for us.
Yeah. So cool. And would you say it's 50% banter, 50% work?
Yeah, how much work is getting done here, boys?
What's the ratio?
Well, I do think, the litmus test is, I don't ever feel that sort of dread, I've got to go to work type thing. A massive part of what I enjoy about it is the people we get to work with, and clearly, Tim and I get along, but we've had the real, I think, joy of building this little team around us that we like working with. The work is super interesting, so we generally get more or less to choose the clients we want to work with. So, maybe 80% banter, 20% work.
Okay, that's perfect.
And philosophically, philosophically, we believe that, the day you're not leaping out of bed to go to work is the day you should change your
100%.
profession. And we did a body of work really early on in the genesis of this company where we delivered this work to a client. They were super happy. It was about 2 p.m. We thought, hey, let's go and quickly debrief. What were the things that went well? What could be improved? We did that in a bar, and sort of Ben, looking into his pint glass, said, how can our lives get better?
Yeah.
And that's now coded in our manifesto, which is our version of the staff handbook. And we ask that question a lot.
Yeah.
Will this make our lives better? Not more money, not more staff, not a bigger office, but, that nearly intangible question of will it make our lives better?
Oh, it's so good. And even just speaking to you guys already, you can just tell that you guys have such a big connection towards each other, and it's actually just so cool to see because Cal and I work together, and it's just like having a friend right next to you, being able to do business with you and life with you. It's actually so special. Hey,
it is. It's funny, and I mean, the parallels are there to a marriage, I guess, in terms of it's not all excellent, and there's bumps, but gee, I in fact in both my marriage and the business partnership, I actively try to take that helicopter view and say, this is pretty good. If you are thinking of having a little go about something, check yourself, because to Tim's point, how is that going to make it better? And particularly, part of this, I hope we'll talk about sort of resilience and stuff. Part of that journey for me has been this sort of checking of the ego and kind of working out, what's really important and what's just pride or point scoring. And there's a few of those things, I reckon, in any relationship that you see people just ride them into the deck. They stick onto something for no real point. They're not able to sort of meet halfway and recognise how good they've got it. And that's certainly something I hope to do, like I said, in both my marriage and my partnership with Tim.
Yeah, I think that's so cool. And before we do get into kind of that resilience shield and speaking on that, I want to ask you guys, you guys both come from military backgrounds and family in military. What was kind of like your childhood growing up before you knew you were kind of going to get into the military?
For me, I was always going to join the army. I was actually a fat kid, so I was that little fat kid that would dress up in army gear. And I'd just seen how much Dad had enjoyed it. He was a helicopter pilot, and he had these just amazing sort of stories. So he just missed out on Vietnam, which is a little different to Tim's dad, who had served. But he'd finished flight school as Australia was sort of ceasing its involvement in Vietnam. So he hadn't deployed operationally, but he'd done these incredible sort of, mapping survey trips of Papua New Guinea and North Queensland, North Australia, and he'd sort of done a lot of work with Les Hiddens, the bush tucker man, in terms of that sort of survival stuff. And so these incredible stories of flying and just the experiential stuff that I figured you couldn't get in any other job. And so I was sort of wed on that. So I think for me it was a pretty linear path.
And so my father spent 35 years in the military, so I was an army brat as well. And he was, like Ben, also the commanding officer of the SAS regiment. And so in my formative years, I was running, no shirt, no shoes around the SAS barracks. They were building this counter-terrorist capability, so all of these assaulters were practicing taking down houses in the neighbourhood that were full of terrorists. And I think that just sears into your memory.
Yeah.
I always thought, a bit like Ben, I want to join the army.
Yeah.
I had some wayward thoughts about being a lawyer, being a teacher, doing other things. But ultimately, that's the path that I chose. And even when I joined the army and you go out into pasture in a light infantry battalion, you need to spend 3, maybe 4 years in the system before you can apply for SAS selection. In those 3 to 4 years, I was really yearning to do selection to be part of the SAS regiment.
Did you ever feel like was there ever a part of you that were like, well, both of your dads have grown up in that, or you've grown up in that with your fathers? Did you ever think that, did you ever feel forced to kind of get into that?
Not at all.
Yeah.
And I mean, my brother, who also ended up in the army or as a doctor, he took a much more circuitous route. He was the person least likely to join the army as a teenager. I was the fat kid dressing up in cams. He was the little punk skateboarder with the kind of 3/4 length shorts and the spray painting the sort of the murals around town. So there was definitely no pressure.
Yeah.
And it was kind of funny. Like any organisation, it's a generational cyclical thing.
Yeah.
I remember as I was getting in the army, Dad was getting out, and he was by no means bitter. He'd had a wonderful career, but he very much was. I remember him saying, this isn't the army I've joined. The sort of fun police have come in and things have changed, and it's not as kind of, I guess, independent and all that sort of stuff." And I remember at the start thinking, that's crazy. This is awesome. This is such a cool environment.
Yeah.
You're bonkers. And then, clearly as I was getting out, I was thinking, it's different to when I joined. So there is that generational thing. But no pressure from Dad either way. He'd enjoyed it and he was happy clearly for us to follow. But equally he would have been happy, I think, if we'd done anything. I was very lucky. I think Tim was as well. Very incredibly supportive parents.
Yeah, and also no pressure from the one-star general. He always said, you forge your own path. The only thing I want you not to compromise are your morals and your principles, and that's really stuck with me throughout my professional life.
That's strong. That's strong. I like that a lot.
Tomorrow, Wednesday, in a most peculiar way. I want to lose control. Tear at my soul.
Okay, so you guys founded the Resilient Shield. Tell us a bit about that. What would you say is the crux of the Resilient Shield?
It very much came about from our own experiences and our experiences in uniform. So we'd seen our colleagues sort of being exposed to all sorts of different stressors, including in combat, and having these really different sort of reactions. And that struck us as a bit strange, on paper. I mean, we were kind of identical humans. We kind of looked the same. We'd been selected for the same stuff. We had the same training, all that sort of thing. And yet people reacted quite differently in the moment under extreme pressure like combat, and then in the days, weeks, months, years that followed. And so that sort of piqued our interest, that there's got to be something to this thing, this resilience concept. And then I think in particular, my brother, Dr. Dan Pronk, the co-author of the book and co-founder of the methodology, he had his own experiences with post-traumatic stress symptoms. He, as a doctor, had some really harrowing experiences on the battlefield, including one rotation, one tour where 3 of his mates were injured while fighting. All 3 of them, he rushed to their side and applied first aid, and none of them was he actually able to save. They essentially died in his arms. And so that obviously shook him. But the strange thing with that is it didn't manifest for a number of years. In fact, it didn't manifest until he was out of the army, living in this tropical paradise in North Queensland, in a civilian job in a hospital, earning, I think, exactly twice as much as he'd earned in the army, just welcomed his 3rd child to the world. No one was shooting him or trying to blow him up.
Yeah.
And yet this was when the sort of some of the symptoms started to come on. And again, this got us very interested in how this whole mechanism worked.
Yeah.
And importantly, how we could get proactive. Like, it seemed a lot of the research and the attention on resilience was only ever sort of implemented after people were having these negative stress events. And we thought, well, why can't we, to use Marcus Aurelius, the famous Roman Stoics phrase, why can't we get active in our own rescue? Why can't we get proactive in developing some tools and mechanisms that could stop us from having that negative stress event?
Yeah, what exactly would you describe resilience as?
And what does it look like to you both?
Yeah, this is where you start when you write a book on it. And in many ways, we were fortunate. Ben and Dan had a discussion over Eggs Benedict, I think, on what does a model look like.
Yeah.
Is it a 220 kilo deadlift? Is it doing yoga or having great mates or not sucking at your job? And our theory was, well, it's kind of all of those things. But at the outset, what do? You try and get a definition on resilience. And there were 3 schools of thought. The first academic school of thought was you need to have this thing called resilience before you enter a stress event. Well, that made no sense because we'd already seen how people in high-pressure situations performed completely different even though they looked identical. They'd been through the same training. They followed the same doctrine and procedures. The second school of thought was, no. You get resilience from coming through a stress event. Now, in many ways, that made no sense at all. Why am I waiting for a stress event to build resilience? And then the third school of thought was the bit from both sides. But the definition that we settled on was actually with our research partner, the University of Western Australia, Dr. Lise Noterbart, herself a psychologist. And she introduced this definition that resilience is a better than expected outcome given the adversity faced. That's brilliant. You can have everything taken away from you, professionally, your health, your social life, your marriage, your kids. You can be confronted with the most chronic of adversity, but if you have a better than expected result, then you would define as being resilient. And so we then entered into what are the components of resilience.
And this was it couldn't just be that physical fitness and the mental toughness because we'd kind of seen people with both those things fall apart. And so we did this literature review and we looked at our own anecdotal experiences and we developed a model that had these 6, what we call the layers of resilience. So an innate layer, nature and nurture, genetics and epigenetics, the stuff inside us. A mind layer, all the spiritual and psychological components that help you get through. A body layer, physiological aspects, essentially sleep, diet and exercise. Social layer, social support, professional, what you get from what you do on a day-to-day basis. And then we added a layer called adaptation, the ability to transfer resilience you might have developed in one domain to the unexpected or the novel challenge. And so we figured these 6 things were probably the components of resilience, but it was really important to us that we validated this. The last thing we wanted was another sort of book. I used to be a tough guy in the army, therefore this is how you should get resilience.
Yes.
Because we didn't think we were tough guys, and we'd seen a lot of tough guys having resilience challenges. And B, because we actually were interested in it for ourselves, and we wanted to have that scientific validation. And so we applied for and won a federal government research grant, which allowed us to do this research in conjunction with Lise, Dr. Lise Noterbart. And essentially, we published the results last month. In a peer-reviewed journal article. And the bottom line is that those 6 layers do each contribute independently and in a statistically significant fashion towards overall resilience. Bottom line is you need all of those things. They all contribute. And while they interrelate, you can't just pull one out and expect to have a complete sort of resilience shield in our parlance.
And, I mean, going through what I would call is like, I think when you talk about SAS, I think resilience is 100%. Like, it's a hardcore place. And how much of your life experience went into what you've built, like from your own, let's say, quote unquote resilience that you've experienced throughout life? How much did that go into, the Resilience Shield?
A massive amount, but ignorantly so. It's not until we did the research did it kind of all make sense. And one little example, so SAS selection course, I know Mark Wales has spoken on a previous episode about this, largely goes for 21 days. On day 1, there's about 150 candidates. They are supremely fit, guys and girls alike, like something off the front cover of a fitness magazine. But by day 2, 3, maybe 4, all of the really fit people have withdrawn themselves. And at the conclusion of the course, the tough ones remain. And so philosophically, what's the difference between fitness and toughness? It's what's between your ears. Sure, the tough people have to be fit, but if the fit people aren't tough, they're not going to make it through. And so, our first truly modifiable layer, is the mind layer. You can't do much about that baseline layer of innate resilience. You sit there with some of that right now, but it's not particularly modifiable. And so Ben has a wonderful line. He talks about the mind layer being the first amongst equals, because that mindset component is what does drive you to go a little further. And ultimately, when you're carrying what you think are unbelievably ridiculous loads or being asked to do things that is unfathomable, it's the mind that gets you through. The body just follows what the mind wants to do.
Absolutely. And we actually we took your resilience test online.
Awesome.
And look, I got 78% resilience, and I'm happy with that. Like, I was quite I was
strong.
Okay, thank you, boys. And Callum wasn't happy with his. Cal, share.
I was salty. I honoured answer. Like, I answered honestly. I got 60%.
Kudos.
So 60%, and pretty much almost equal across the boards, across the mind, body, work side of things. And I said to Em, I was like, I got 60. Are you kidding? Like, I thought, not I'm a tough guy, but I thought I was a pretty resilient bastard.
Yeah.
But can you, elaborate at all? I know you can't break down my score necessarily.
Tell us how resilient we are.
Should I redo it in live? No.
No. Well, yeah. If you want to feel good, then, then
exactly.
certainly game the test. And like any self-administered test, there's that sort of potential for error. We've wrestled with how we present these results. The first thing that we want everyone to understand is that in a bell curve, 90% of people can't be above 50% median. It statistically doesn't work like that. And so particularly the shape of this bell curve in terms of our responses, 60% is actually right up the, if you look at all the responses left of that, it is well and truly above average. The point, though, is that there is so much variance in terms of how people answer and how people interpret questions and all that sort of stuff. We offer that the bigger value is looking in terms of the differences in between your own individual layers, because there is variance both in terms of how people answer the questions, but also in terms of people's own perspectives of resilience. So it's almost counterproductive comparing scores, even though we are aware we give you a score that compares you against the population. So we really stress to people, don't get hung up on the number. Don't hang up your sort of boots on the fact you've got a great 78 is a great score in terms of the percentages. But have a look more about what it means to you. And if Callum, if you're pretty even across the layers, kudos. I mean that to me, I'd take that as a much I guess a better sort of result than any sort of number in the overall score.
Yeah, and 78% kudos to you, Emily. 60% kudos to you, Callum. Whoever got 20%, kudos to you. That's not a competition.
Exactly.
Resilience is a lifelong individual endeavour, and your 99% can go to 48% in the space of 12 months if you have a whole heap of things taken from you.
I'm just looking at your body language. Exactly. It's not a competition, but Emily is sitting there.
Anyway, it's
not a competition, but I won.
Hands behind her head.
No, I actually...
saying, I beat you, Callum.
Yeah. Before, honestly...
It's not the first time she's belittled me. I'm kidding.
If it's any consolation, I think last time I did it, I'm about 68 or something.
All right.
It's
comparison.
it's
here we
not,
go. We're like, don't compare, but everyone, let's say our scores.
It would be interesting to find the person who's at 99%.
And actually,
is it possible to be not possible in a sense that I'm sure it is, but if you could answer the questions in a certain way to get to just 99%?
You could game it for sure.
Yeah.
And that's to Ben's point. The idea of the resilience survey is not to answer aspirationally.
It's
and
actually
not to answer in a way that, yesterday I had fruit and vegetables and slept well. In the aggregate, what are the behaviours, the habits that you absolutely do all of the time? And so you could game it, but it's not going to be helpful.
No, it's not.
The idea is to
be honest.
When considering when considering resilience, like, where do I start? That's the whole idea. And it was Ben's brainchild, this survey, which is administered by the University of Western Australia. It's free, it's private, it's confidential. And if you want to do it, resilientshield.com, follow the link. It gives you that breakdown of your overall resilience.
Definitely cool
but
to see.
But more importantly, the score of each of your layers. So don't do things heroically to make changes.
Yeah.
Just identify, okay, well, where am I weak? Where am I vulnerable? How do I bolster that layer in doing things that are more sustainable, that aren't faddish, that aren't gimmicky? Just make a little contribution every day. And then more broadly, zoom out, make a contribution every day to every layer. Try and sleep better, eat better, do some exercise. Try and stay connected with friends, family, colleagues. Try and work on your mindset insofar as that might be possible by kind of recoding activities. Do some meditation and mindfulness. And, in your professional layer, do things that improve that. And last but not least, our bonus layer is that adaptation layer. Find a meaningful challenge. Something that is going to take you out of your comfort zone. Perhaps select something you don't really like doing. Because the adaptation layer is what's going to allow us to do things that we never thought were possible, to confront the unknown and the unknowable, to get rid of all of the zombies when they descend upon us, armed with nothing more than what you have right now.
Is that why you think having resilience is so important to everyday humans?
Yeah, one of the really interesting things we did early in the piece, and in one of the early chapters, we talk about this concept of happiness. And I do think that so much of even just the tools to improve, for example, say your mind layer. So meditation was something Tim and I came to very late in the piece, something we both derived a lot of joy from. And while that sort of builds our resilience, it also builds our happiness and contentedness. Likewise, gratitude practices and being in the moment, noticing small things, enjoying this conversation and not thinking, oh shit, I've got to do X, Y, and Z afterwards. All of those are resilience-building tools, but they also make your life that much better in the moment. And so I think that concept, as Tim mentioned, all those little choose your challenge, choose your struggle, achieve little incremental goals and enjoy the journey, that's, to me, an equal definition of resilience and happiness. And I think there's that really strong relationship between them.
And the errors and failure too. I mean, people are so worried about
failing.
Making an error or failing. We're living in this society. I look at it with my kids. They want to be instant experts.
Yes.
Well, there is no such thing as an instant expert. Anyone who's a virtuoso or a master in their field didn't sit down and become an expert in an hour. To coin the Anders Ericsson, they spent the 10,000 hours in increments of 30 minutes, 1 hour. They changed their habits, built those good routines, and were consistent. So that's kind of the key to this is what can you do consistently every day to contribute to your resilience, to build you into being a better human, but importantly, make you a better father, mother, uncle, leader, friend.
Do you think resilience is a term that's like just thrown around super lightly, like in both professional senses and personal senses? Like
is it just a buzzword
that
just
people
are...
Oh, you got to be resilient. You got to be more resilient. Like I hear that all the time now, but like, what does that truly mean? And I mean... You go, if you got on.
No, I was going to say we do too, and I mean, given that's our business, we're not that upset by the fact that it's kind of a topical sort of But I don't know whether it's thrown around lightly. I think there is definitely a lot of an increased sort of awareness of its importance, and I think a global pandemic has sharpened people's attention to the fact that we have got a lot of pressure in our lives, and it's always been that way, but I think we're focusing on it now. I think it's probably I was going to say poorly defined, but it probably can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
Yeah, I think that's
and what we did. Yeah, and what we did try and do with our definition and our model is get as holistic an approach to it as we could.
And I think it just makes sense. What you're saying, it just makes sense. It's not something where it's really hard for me to understand what resilience is or how I can continue or become more resilient. It's actually although it's not easy, it is easy because it's just something that's just like, you boys have said it's just so perfectly, it just makes so much sense.
Yeah, you can actually pull it in. And I remember when I did that question and it got to like the family, like the friends and family one, I was like thinking, what does this have to do with resilience? Like, and it answered it, and it was like, do you have a family member you can talk to?
Yeah.
And I couldn't actually agree with it because I don't have someone. I have a loved one for sure, but like I don't have a tight connection with my family at all. And I was like, what the heck? Like, man, what has this got to do with me being resilient? And it is funny now that you've said those like kind of foundational block points that it isn't just you got to be the biggest, toughest, baddest motherfucker, you know, like around in the room. It's
This was why it was important for us to have that science underneath it, and you know the science does say that human connections, and whether they're family, friends, significant others, but you know where you can be vulnerable in front of someone and you can tell them, you know, sort of you open your heart to them, that is important. And the one, like I said, we sort of stumbled into meditation through this. I think if you'd asked us 10 years ago, you know, why don't you try meditating? I joked that my mind would have gone straight to sort of hippies and mung beans. And about the most anti-SAS thing I could have thought of. Yeah. But again, looking at it through the prism of the research, this is gym training for your brain. I mean, this allows you to make better decisions under pressure. It actually rewires your brain to overcome the amygdala response, the fight or flight type response. It's absolutely the best thing you should be doing if you're looking at being a decision maker or a leader in combat. Yeah. And so the science has been a real eye-opener for us and has introduced us to concepts like meditation and gratitude, which I think would have seen inaccessible, or maybe they've got a bit of a PR problem amongst Australian males or whatever. But that for us has been a great lens to make sense of some of these things that have really subsequently helped us personally and do help others.
Yeah, and one of the fascinating things, Callum, on the social part, that psychosocial layer, it's just anchored in some fascinating research, and without boring you senseless on it, sure, we want people to be there for us and we want to be there for others. But, you know, out of Harvard, there's a body of work by a gentleman called Dr. David McClellan who worked out that 95% of our success in life is attributed to who we hang out with. Yeah. And, you know, more colloquially, people have picked up on that. You know, show me your friends and I'll show you your future, or you're the sum of the 5 people you hang around. But there's research saying that who is in your social layer absolutely move the needle 100%. On how successful you are.
Yes.
Which therefore logically also moves the needle on your happiness, whether you're, you know, flourishing or not.
Yeah. I love that. And something that I live by is like, how I do one thing is how I do everything. And I just believe that like it's so cool because how you do one thing or the social circles that you're in actually impacts so many other things over here as well.
It's
And there's research behind this. So a lady called Angela Duckworth who wrote a book called Grit, which is a great read on aspects of resilience. But she talks about the transferability. There's a thing called the Glick study talking about the transferability. So it's exactly what you said, Emily. If you are able to stick with, I don't know, carrying your shopping bags to your car instead of putting them in a trolley, you know, that is absolutely setting you up to then, you know, stay through high school, which is absolutely setting you up to stick it out through a tough job, which absolutely helps you sort of extend your marriage. You know, there's all these statistics that show the transferability of these things. And that folksy wisdom you just espoused, the way you do one thing is the way you do everything.
Yeah.
It's a cool way of looking at these tiny little challenges we get presented with every single day.
Yeah.
Which comes back to that question, can you train mindset? Well, Ben's just rattled off 8 things you can do that sound physical, but they're absolutely training mindset.
Yeah, exactly. Touch on the, you know, the meditation and kind of like when we meditate to clear our mind, you know, there's a lot of anxiety and stress and all of these things that happen in our every day-to-day life. How do you think stress affects being resilient?
Well, it's necessary in our life. If we didn't have stress, we'd be amoebas. You know, we're pretty pathetic, the human being. I'm going to paraphrase some of Ben's stuff here, but we don't have armour, we don't have claws, we don't have poison, we can't run very fast. So stress has enabled us to get to the top of the food chain, largely because we're incentivised by neurochemistry to collaborate at large scale. There's no other animal on the planet that does that. But there's Yerkes and Dodson, two academics, looked at performance and stress. If you think about the time that you've performed the best in your life, doesn't matter whether it's physical, academic, in your family life, there undoubtedly will be a stressor or stressors involved. Let me rephrase that. Think of the time you were proudest of your achievement. Nearly guarantee there were stressors. Might have been time pressure, scrutiny from your boss. There could have been fear, pain, or the risk of those two things. So the short version is stress is necessary.
Yep.
We want to embrace the stress. I mean, putting it into the Gold's Gym model, if you went to the gym and lay under the bench press and always push the same weight, nothing would happen.
Yeah.
You would get to that point where your body's adapted and you're just not going to get any gains. But if you constantly increase the load, then you get the improvement. And that is true regardless of how we apply stress in our life, regardless of whether it's a mental stress or something that we're unfamiliar with or uncomfortable with, whether it's a fear, and I'm talking an irrational fear.
Yeah.
How do you overcome an irrational fear? Well, you confront it in a very measured, careful way. And in doing that, you are naturally building the stock of resilience, but embracing the stress in order to do it.
It's like progressively overloading the mind.
Literally.
That's cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, and we're going to be cautious about that. If we were to zoom out and look back to the 1980s, life was much simple in terms of the amount of information we consumed there.
Yeah.
And there's research out of the University of California, Los Angeles, that says we now consume 34 gigabytes a day of information, the equivalent of reading a 100,000-word book. But we don't have the purge valves. Our brain is very old. It hasn't adapted to be able to consume that level of information. And that's why we're starting to see issues with people not able to process it, but more importantly, not able to flush the nonsense from their brain. Enter meditation and mindfulness. Outside of sleep, which is critically important to flush the nonsense and to sort of defrag or take out the trash, empty the cache, meditation and mindfulness is also something that we can embrace that enables us to defrag, take out the trash, empty the cache, to flush the crud from our brain.
Man, that's good stuff. I was just thinking then I'd had to process my answer that it's still umming and ahhing in my head, but it made me think, because that family side of thing stumped me, that I was like, oh, why is this in this here? Not growing up with a dad in my life, but having a single parent, I thought I had to grow up really, really quick, and I've just recently had a daughter, and it's making me think man, I thought I was resilient because I was young. I had to grow up really, really fast, right? Because I had to do the dad of the house for my family. And now thinking about my daughter, I'm like, all right, so now I'm her father, and you guys having pivotal fatherly roles, being in the SAS, fostering an environment where resilient can be taught at a young age, or not even taught, but like you're saying, it's like you're just in the environment, what does that look like?
It's a really good question, and it's a really important question. A lot of the research on sort of the innate aspects of resilience do look at those massive periods of what they call neuroplasticity. So when our brain's changing, it's typically as a toddler and as an adolescent, where our brains are plastic throughout our lives, but those big periods of change. And there's some really interesting research. In fact, we just interviewed Dr. Justine Glick, who was the author of this research, about the physical differences in people's brains who'd suffered what she calls ELS, early lifehood stress. So if kids are exposed to measured stress, like your progressive overload example, then they develop stronger brains. They physically have different parts of their brains are better formed. And these are the regions that deal with things like emotional regulation and mood control and that sort of thing. So the first thing, and we've joked before on podcasts, I'm a little bit of a helicopter parent. I sort of don't want my kids to get exposed to too much. And that's not doing them any favours. We do need to let them sort of have that exposure to wrestle with stressors, to deal with things, to work things out.
Yes.
Just like you would have done, Callum, in your growing up early. Probably not by choice, but you were in a position where you were faced with these stressors, and it sounds like you had the tools and the ability to process and get through them. I bet you have a very well-developed parietal lobe or whatever. You know what I mean? Like you've developed those resilience skills as a result, and so we don't want to wrap our kids in cotton wool too much, and so that's a big part of it. I think the second part is modelling those behaviours. To Tim's kids are growing up seeing him meditate twice a day.
Totally.
So good.
That's just a thing you do. And your parents always suck and say you're not going to go straight to that straight away. But, if they're seeing you exercise, if they're seeing you prioritise sleep, if they're seeing you, just take it easy on booze and eat semi-decently and recognise that these things are helping in that well-being, that resilience side, that white noise in the background is massive.
Yes.
And can you camouflage some of these resilience practices from your kids? Absolutely. Indeed, for those that are planning kids, you can start at pre-zero. I mean, just be healthy about what you do. That's going to improve your chances of conception. And, when the child's in the womb, remove your access to toxins, eat real foods, and so on and so forth. And, from that 0 to 18, there's some fascinating research about the gut microbiome, which is crucially important for our mood, for our heart rate, and a range of other things, including our immune system. Eat snails, eat dirt. That's what we want our kids to do, to be exposed to those bacterias. And then really from 18, it's about enabling them from 18 months, it's about enabling them opportunities to take controlled risks. Allow them to fall off the scooter. Allow them to play on the swing set. Don't shelter them from that. And then as they sort of crest into the primary years or nearly pre-primary, you're not going to teach a child to meditate, but you can certainly teach them colouring in. Colouring in is a meditation activity, as is reading a story out loud, as is singing a song together. Those kids aren't thinking about anything else when they're doing that. Introducing Lego, same principle. And then the older they get, into the primary school years, the more we can incorporate breathing practices. Understanding that you can regulate your emotion. When you do feel angry, you'll do irrational things, but being able to center yourself using really basic techniques will improve the way that you're seen as a human being. And then as we crest into senior years, we can start to incorporate the more human tactics and techniques that will contribute to resilience, including playing team sport, including the social interactions, including measured amounts of social media, where the social media contributes to you as a human. Full disclosure, there's not much evidence, if any. I look to Ben to interrupt if I'm not right, that social media contributes to resilience. But it's certainly a fantastic on-ramp to find like-minded people. To work out, well, what's the organisation I'd love to volunteer with? I've moved new city, where's my like-minded gym mates or walking group or running group or macrame organisation? So all super, super valuable. But you can parent resilient kids. And the other part is that it is the genetics bit. We know that resilience is coded inside DNA. You can be predisposed to things like depression and anxiety, and it relates to how their parents came through life. So, we can get ahead of that. We can certainly get ahead of, our kids and their kids by incorporating those good practices in our life. To Ben's point, be the great resilience role model in the house.
I love that.
Or down the sporting club, or when you're coaching your team, or in the gym.
I love that so much. If you guys could tell the world one thing, what would it be?
I think the ego thing is a big one. You know, get over yourself a little bit. And
Yeah.
I'm speaking a lot from my own personal experience.
Yeah.
It's funny how much, I guess, poison we bring into
Yeah.
our own lives by getting hung up on ourselves. And I think this is, again, where things like mindfulness practices can help come in if you're able to get that perspective and just calm yourself a bit through those sort of things. I reckon that would go a long way to removing a lot of the angst I see on a day-to-day basis around me.
And we embrace a poem by James Elroy Flecker called The Golden Road to Samarkand, and in that poem a pilgrim talks about going always a little further. That's a great mantra for life. It doesn't matter whether it's in your social life, your professional life, you know, what you do physically on a day-to-day basis, but just go always a little further. It's a bit like embracing that stress. You have options. They confront you multiple times every day. You've got the escalator or the stairs.
Yes.
You've got the donut, you've got the apple. Going always a little further is just changing those little things that ultimately will improve you as a human.
Damn. I
They
like
know
that.
what they're talking about.
I like that. So with the Resilient Shield and your book as well, where the projection of that, what do you want it to see to happen?
I mean, at a little micro level, we've been just blown away by the sort of feedback we've gotten and the interactions that this has led to. I mean, we were, 6 weeks ago, we were in the UK presenting to a large corporate on Canary Wharf, and then the sort of next day or 2 days later up in a sort of county area of just out of Dublin in Ireland, presenting to a group, a fitness-based group. And that, for us, has just been amazing that sort of this little sort of concept that we came up with could have extended to the point where these people invite us over to present. So those connections, I think, are what we're hoping to continue to progress. We love the idea that there is so much discussion on resilience,
Yeah.
and we love the idea that there's so much good stuff out there. I mean, you look at the work Hugh Van Cuylenberg's doing in the Resilience Project, talking about these wonderful concepts of gratitude, empathy and mindfulness. We are very much looking at this, clearly it's a business and clearly we're sort of doing stuff behind it from a commercial sense, but it is awesome that there's some awareness getting around and that people are starting to embrace some of these concepts. And for us, whichever vector makes more sense, if it's going to get someone thinking about, meditation or gratitude or eating a bit better or exercising a bit, whatever it is, then, we're all for it. So we, like I said, are delighted that it has started to resonate, that we're getting some really good feedback and interaction, and that we're starting to help people, and we want to continue to progress that.
I love that, and especially like we have spoken to someone you spoke at one of
the conference
at a conference,
Yeah.
and like she was
Yeah,
almost
she was in awe.
speechless.
Like,
She was like, what they unlocked for me was like almost unbelievable. And we're like touching it, and she's like, I can't. We'll have to sit down because and as well, like I think in a workplace, like we both work for ourselves, but in a workplace, like having, it's not just like just do your job, go home.
Yeah.
If your company is investing in you and understanding that each individual person, like you said, has these little vectors that they sit along and they can connect with, then it's like then that person's strong. It just keeps going. It's a snowball
it's an
effect.
on-flow.
And like you said, like if you can build resilience in children, those children are going to grow up to be an adult. And if that was lost in that,
they'll then teach their kids, and
it's
then
like this big cycle. And it's so cool that it's becoming like it is. More research in it. I didn't even know there was so much.
I mean, Tim,
behind it.
we talk about the shield as the iconography, and Tim's got this beautiful line about the shield being for the common good of all. It's not just about protecting yourself individually, and we think that metaphor carries into developing resilience. If you are more resilient as an individual, you are going to be a better colleague, boss, girlfriend,
agree.
parent, child, whatever it is, and so there's that almost that virtuous circle that can spread around.
We've also had some great fun. I mean, with Dan.
I can only imagine you guys are.
I know. I want to hang out with
I
you
want to
guys.
have a beer with these guys.
Well, we're about to run a retreat on Fitzroy Island in late October, and as I've said to the boys, there can be no one on that retreat that's having more fun than us. That's it, right? We have to have the most amount of fun from anyone. Because in having fun, in being a bit playful, to your point on the banter in the office and beyond, it is inspiring us. And I guess the other thing is the author's journey, like you, Ben talked about ego. You start there, definitely. You want to have your name on the front cover of a book and you want it to be a bestseller. But the deeper we go into this journey, the more we realise that story that you've told about someone who's like, whoa, now I know where to start.
Yeah.
Now I know, I've assessed my resilience and what I can do about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I do genuinely tell people that if only one person ever bought this book, but that person raced up to us in the street and said, this has changed my life or this has saved my life, that's the reason why the book's been written.
Yeah.
And, we've had thousands and thousands of interactions like that.
Yeah.
This book has changed my life. This book has saved my life, which is tragic in itself.
Yeah.
But such heartwarming stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, and some of our really fun moments are going to a book club. Book clubs read the book. They say, hey, would you come and have a glass of Chardonnay and talk about the book?
Yes.
We turn up. It's an all women book club. And we just get grilled, and they kind of love the book.
Yes.
Yeah, you
And
have
it
a little
kind of
chat.
disproves in many ways. It disproves in many ways that it's just a book for blokes. And in fact, little vignettes about a lady talking about reading the book. She'd actually bought the book for a husband who was having his own struggle, got back home and opened it and read the first few pages and then palmed him away. So you get away, I'm reading the book first. He got captivated in some of the stories. And importantly, also, that they're not just our stories. We tell the stories of people from all walks of life. From Harry Harris, the cave diver, rescuing the Thai junior soccer team, through to many others who have made their way through mental health, illness. Emily Skye, who people look at, she's a fitness influencer, she's famous for being famous, but you don't see the backstory of the struggle. Yeah. All of these things just create this rich narrative, and nearly anyone that interacts with the survey or interacts with the book can really identify with the people in the book. But if you hold the survey at arm's length, you can identify that, that's pretty much me.
You guys are honestly incredible and doing such incredible work, and we can't wait to even see some fun on the retreat you are doing. But before we do go, we normally just play a little game. It's a little fast 5 questions. Basically, we're just going to reel them off, and you guys just have to answer them as quickly as you can. Okay?
Good stuff.
Okay. First is introvert or extrovert.
Absolute borderline centre, gusting introvert as I get older.
That's BS. He's more down the introverted scale, and I know that because we've both had psychological tests done of us, and I'm completely in the middle, 50-50. I love my solitude, but I also love company.
Yeah, okay.
Guilty pleasure.
It would be probably 90s pop, and particularly boy bands and sort of...
My
pop.
man. And what's yours, Tim?
In fact, there's a funny story. I was once in a gym, a deployed gym, so it's a real, imagine a rustic, tough guy, sort of SAS, Special Forces gym in the middle of Timor. And, so people shirts off, lifting, big dudes with tats, this sort of scene. And there was no music, and I plugged my iPod in and put my playlist on, forgetting that guilty pleasure that I just mentioned. And the first tune's like, Bulls on Parade, Rage or whatever. It's scene appropriate. And then on comes Baby One More Time or something like that. And of course, everyone had seen me plug the thing in. I've got nowhere to go. And so
it wasn't me.
I just had to own it. And I got some very interesting looks.
My guilty pleasure, and we don't advocate this in the Resilient Shield, but we have an office in our bar, and I love having a drink with our crew. Cracking a beer, and at the end of the day, just having a chat. That's probably one of my guilty pleasures.
I love that. I love that. What's one thing to instantly make your day better?
I do think meditation. I know I'm banging that drum, but my daily sort of meditation practice. Well, when I say daily, if I get it in every couple of days, it's about average. But I love Wim Hof breathing. I think there's something about manipulating your breath that can really do good things, and then just a period of sort of mindfulness or even transcendental meditation, which I've got introduced through by Tim. But that it's still a paradox for me, because there are days where I know I need it, but I can't seem to find the time, even though it would make more time. You know, it's a stupid thing, but when I do it, it instantly makes my day better.
Yeah, I'm going to parrot that. I practice Vedic meditation. I went and did the course because I didn't believe in it. I was very skeptical, and then I asked myself the question, well, what are you afraid of? Go and be involved in it. But that absolutely makes every day better for me. It makes my life better. I've got more focus, more clarity. I can pay attention. I remember things. My working memory's far improved. Ben might doubt that. And I think my interactions with those people that I care for and love are much richer.
Yeah.
So without question, it's meditation. And I'm try and practice it every day. I meditate most days, but don't always get it right, and that's kind of okay. And your point, Emily, about meditation being this odd thing, you close your eyes, you have these racing thoughts, that's also okay. I mean, a meditation teacher of mine who's done some work with us, Erin, says just kind of surf the thoughts and ask yourself the question, why am I thinking that? Is that a rational, logical thought? That's kind of okay. It's the point of examining or being curious about who you are and what's making you tick. So meditation.
I think as well, though, sorry, just quickly on that meditation, we end up, like, I remember before I started meditating, thinking that A, I couldn't do it, and B, I was meant to be completely still. Like, I wasn't allowed to even have thoughts, and if I had thoughts coming in my head when I'm meditating, it's wrong or I didn't do it right. And it's just,
that sort of self-compassion and self-forgiveness is a wonderful thing I think you get from meditation.
Same.
When you stop beating yourself up about that, and again, linked to that idea about ego, letting go this idea of being perfect, or thinking, trying to be seen to be perfect. They're all intertwined practices.
If you're in my head this morning, Emily, you would just see just the most irrationally logical thoughts. And I'm not an experienced meditator; I still have to work through. But I'm trying to focus on transcending, to think about nothing. And then in pops that, don't forget a mask because you're going to have to catch public transport to see a client today. You've got to pack a mask. I'm like, okay, acknowledge the thought.
Yes.
Oh, also, you've got to get that email across to the accountant before 9. Okay, right, acknowledge the thought. It's just this constant struggle. But in many ways, I mean, now that I say it out loud, it's logical. Our brain's trying to keep us safe.
Exactly.
So therefore, in many ways, it's very defendable, those thoughts. But there are many that aren't, So, it's good fun just surfing the thoughts.
I like that, surfing the thoughts. Well, we've had the absolute pleasure of chatting to you. Where can people find your book, get onto the Resilient Shield, follow you, listen to you, plug yourself away?
The Resilient Shield is available in all good bookshops and probably some of the crap ones too. You can find out more about us at resilientshield.com. In that same location, you can also take our Resilience Survey. As I mentioned, it's free, it's private, it's confidential, and it's administered in conjunction with the University of Western Australia. We've got a shop at the website. You can buy author-signed copies of the book there. We'll inscribe them if you wanted to give them as a gift. We've got our own Resilience Journal, which is all about encoding good habits and a variety of other things, including information on our Resilience Retreat on Fitzroy Island, 27 to 30 October, where we're trying to make people the best versions of them that we possibly can, but also ensuring the transferability of a lot of the techniques into what they do as a parent, as a friend, and as a work colleague.
And socials. We do actually have a social media presence, thanks to Tim.
So at Resilient Shield, pretty much on all of the socials exactly the same, at Resilient Shield on Instagram, on Facebook. I look at Ben, he'll cringe, also on TikTok.
Yes. Get
Beautiful.
on it.
That's what you need to be doing.
Prominent. It is.
And on LinkedIn, so we push some reasonable content and some tactics and techniques on those platforms. Try and keep them in really simplified form.
Yeah.
But if you're viewing those things, you can absolutely know that it's grounded in research. So we give you the tactic. You don't need to know the backstory. We've done all the heavy lifting on reading the literature. Just employ these little things in your life.
Tim and Ben, we have had the absolute pleasure of having you on this episode today. Thank you so
thanks heaps.
much, and have a great day.
Yeah, have the best day. Appreciate you both.
Thanks.
No, I love
guys.
it. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.
Well, pick my jaw up off the floor. That was...
How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. I feel like I honestly need to lie down and just think about some stuff because it kind of got to me.
Interesting.
A
So
little
it
bit.
actually really, like, there was a lot of things
I still
that you took
thought I
away.
was like, not like I thought I was like this big, strong, tough guy because it's not about what you look like that you're resilient, but I still thought I was like, shit, I've been through a bit. And people, I think a lot of people have told me that I've been through a lot.
Yes.
And so they think, then I'm like, yeah, I've been through, not like I'm a victim mentality at all, but you know what I mean? Like,
I actually
damn, it must
do.
have been hard for you, been through a lot. And I was like, yeah. So I did the test, the survey on the Resilience Shield, got 60%, thought it'd be higher. Found out it was actually not a bad score.
Exactly.
So-
And also, like, it's funny, isn't it? Because, like, when we get validated, like, no, that wasn't a bad score. We're like, I can breathe again.
Yeah, so-
Whereas, like, it kind of, like the boys said, like, it really didn't matter what your score was. If your score was 20%, it's nothing to get down on and about yourself. It's just like, okay, if you look at my life, what does that look like? Where am I implementing strategies X, Y, Z? And it's like, oh, okay, I just need to implement here or
in
integrate
little tiny
here.
pockets. I like that. They've got like these little 6 vectors that you can fine tune and just increase those little parts
Totally.
of resilience. So,
If you could take one thing away from this episode, what would it be?
man, their description of resilience, I thought resilience was purely just overcoming
Like
adversity,
grit.
but the way they described it was an outcome better than what you thought it would be, which is so cool. Like if you're going through a hard time, it's an outcome that you thought you're like, I don't think I can do this, and then you do it. You're like, ah. And how many times have we said that? We're like, I don't think this is going to happen.
Yeah.
And it happens.
Yeah.
And it's like that little voice inside. But each time, it is like that little bit of grit that you add to yourself. You're like, no,
Yeah, you
I can
become
do
more
this. A little bit of
resilient.
self-belief. Yeah, you ultimately, it's a cycle.
It's a cycle.
Every time that I touch your face, it sends me spinning off into space, and I don't know what or where I'll go. And every time that I turn around, you're always drunk, laying on the ground, and I thought I'd be the one to pull you through. Love is momentary, lapse in reason. Love is so many promises and treasons. It's good to walk beside the one you think you love. It's hard to walk through life alone and scared, but I'll be there for you. And every time that I kiss your lips, I swear it makes my heart skip. And I'm afraid of what I might do. And every time that you touch my face, it sends me spinning back into space. And I don't know what I'm supposed to prove. Love is momentary, lapse in reason. Love is so many promises and treasons. It's good to walk inside the one you think you love. It's hard to walk
Now to the debrief. We try to go always a little further in this podcast and greatly appreciate your input. Please let us know your feedback, the good, the bad, or the ugly. Also, if you know someone who is living a life less ordinary, we'd love to hear about them. You can get in touch at debrief@unforgiving60.com. That's debrief@unforgiving60.com. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please tell your friends and write a review for us on Apple Podcasts. Until next episode, keep filling your unforgiving minutes with 60 seconds worth of distance run. See you next time on the Unforgiving 60.
Square